Well, it's late Sunday night here at Investors Group Field. Few hours after the Blue Bombers have defeated the Saskatchewan Roughriders. Press release has just come down the line. The Blue Bombers have traded veteran quarterback Buck Pierce to the British Columbia Lions for Canadian receiver Akeem Foster. Paul Wiecek, football writer at the Free Press. What is your immediate reaction?
You know, it's interesting, because we talked to Tim Burke about this yesterday, and we asked Tim Burke during the news conference, what are your plans? There was an opportunity, maybe Bombers could have put Buck Pierce on the 9-game injured list. They didn't do that yesterday, so we asked Tim, what the Bombers intended to do with Buck in the second half of the season. He said he didn't know. He said that they would ponder things and discuss it after the game. It was a curious answer, and I think it's become clear why that was such a curious answer now.
Ed Tait, also football and hockey writer. I guess, Paul, you're a hockey writer at the Free Press. We're all football. We do everything around here. Kyle Walters has not been in this job but a month, and he pulls the move that Joe Mack seemed either unwilling or unable to do. Kyle Walters getting busy quite quickly.
Yeah, this is a significant move for Kyle, probably his biggest move to date, moving a name guy like Buck Pierce. It gives the Bombers a little bit more depth in their Canadian talent. Foster's a big dude who can run around and, played college football with Coachie and Enoch Mwamba at St. FX and Antigonish, Nova Scotia. So, he's got some upside. I think everybody thought that Buck's days here were done. It's kind of a weird moment because Buck did an awful lot, I think, for this franchise. Married a girl from here, has lived in Winnipeg, really committed himself to the town. But, ultimately, the 2011 season was his shining moment, but the rest of it's been kind of a disappointment. And for the Bombers to be able to get something for a guy like that, I think is a pretty shrewd move by Kyle Walters.
Yeah, I don't think you can, underestimate what Buck Pierce meant at certain points to this franchise. He did a lot for the Winnipeg Blue Bombers, but in the end, he had become dispensable and was no longer part of their plans. Kyle Walters to get Akeem Foster, I think, is, much better than nothing. And this is a guy that will probably immediately come in and start for the Bombers. Paul, Kyle Walters is on a short leash, but he's not acting like it. He's acting like a veteran GM. He's bringing people in every day. He's not afraid to pull the trigger on a deal, and this is his opportunity to prove to Wade Miller that this should be his job full time.
Yeah, exactly right. I think, he was a bit of an underdog coming into this job, and there was sort of the initial thinking was, well, he was the assistant GM, so let's make him the acting GM, but hey, we're going to get serious and find someone else at the end of the season. I think he's playing every card he possibly can right now to try and keep that job. The one reservation I kind of have about this deal, and it sort of talks about, references, some of the things that you were saying about, what a big role that Buck has had in this community. It's kind of a shame that it ends like this on a Sunday night with this sort of backdoor press release. It's going to be lost in all the headlines about the Bombers' Banjo Bowl win today. Kind of too bad, Buck's going to kind of go out with a whimper more than a bang, and I guess that was going to happen anyway, but and maybe I'm just looking at this from the perspective of a reporter who suddenly got another story to write tonight, but how does this affect me? It affects me badly today, Gary.
Yeah, well, I would counteract that by saying that, they could have just shot the horse in the late night in winter and not, given him an opportunity to go and try and play somewhere else and be part of something. And the BC Lions are probably going to be a playoff team, and whether or not, Travis Hulé is their starter, but Buck Pierce could, there could be an injury, there could be an opportunity for him to at least play a little bit more football. He probably wasn't going to play anymore in Winnipeg.
Well, and last point on that, that's interesting that he ends up in BC. That's a team that gave up on Buck Pierce 4 years ago. Wally Bono made it very clear he loved Buck Pierce like a son, but he was injured way too often for the BC Lions' liking, and Wally Bono, quite frankly, thought for Buck Pierce's own long-term best interests, maybe football wasn't a continuing viable thing for Buck. How interesting that 4 seasons later, after the BC Lions give up on Buck Pierce, there he is back in a Lions uniform. I mean, that's going to make for an interesting dynamic this week too out there. It'll be an interesting story for those guys out there.
For sure. I think we can all agree on this. We wish Buck Pierce good health and good football. And, as guys that covered him, I would thank Buck Pierce. He was straight up and faced some music around here, and it was not always very easy for him. For the Winnipeg Free Press, I'm Gary Lawless. That's Ed Tait. That's Paul Wiecek. Thanks for reading, and good night.